Hello everybody, and welcome to our almost final installment. This is the last regularly scheduled module for our course. I'm working on another bonus one, which you won't be responsible for, but I'm not finished with it, so it's not going to get taped today. We'll do it a little later on. And that one will be a special present to you guys. Right, Penelope? Okay. So Penelope is going to help us out. I know Annika is lurking about here. So I think it's about time for cats to wake up from their naps and get busy. In closing it out, so we did the deconstructivist thing. We're starting to tear it apart. We've talked in terms of affect, stream of affect, being explained in a way that conforms to a pre-existing narrative, and then we call those explanations emotions to make sense of our experience. One way to look at it, right? I'm not saying you have to look at emotion that way. What I'm saying is that's the point to which we've gotten about at this point in time. So now we're going to talk a little bit about digital emotion, and at the end of this I'm going to present you with your last activity to complete. So let's tie it together then. Again, OHIO, what are these crazy guys doing? I think they're jumping over burning logs, would be my guess. So you go guys, and you do your OHIO thing. There's Annika, so now we got both of them. Hi Annika, what are you doing, sweetie? Where are you going, Penelope? Yeah, Penelope likes to do this, crawl across me and jump over there. Annika, Penelope, what are you doing, sweetie? Settle down. All right, so now maybe we got the cat squared away or not. All right, sweetie, are you squared away? Not so much. All right, so let's talk about relationships as multifaceted. Let's talk about Simondon's theory, affective collective baggage, if you will, technobiological emotion, the future of emotion. Thank you for sneezing on me, sweetie. So, it really is about digital emotion. We've entered the digital age, information age, whatever you want to call it. Does it make a difference in our study of emotion? Let's take a look. So, are we talking in New World relationships? You know, we've thought of relationships primarily as involving or being limited to our conspecifics. Remember one of my favorite words, conspecific. What does it mean? You are not my conspecific, although you think you are. So, Penelope and I are not of the same species. So conspecific is within species. We are interspecies mingling here, right, rather than interspecies. So she likes that. Annika, what are you doing? So consider other relationships beyond our conspecifics, like pets as ever-increasing source of companionship. Right? And we see animals in school, in the classroom, which we never would have seen before, as service animals, emotional support animals, if you will. So this is part of the future, right? We see virtual relationships taking place that involve no face-to-face interaction. Consider summer. I'm going to attempt to develop a rapport with 30 students in Intro Social Psych second level writing class. I, for the life of me, don't know how we're going to pull this off, but this summer session is virtual, right? So here we go. I'm going to try and do that because it's a class where you got to get tight with people. So. Relationships with virtual technology and information via smartphones and computers and whatever the heck comes in next, right? And there will be something to replace those. So eventually your kids will be looking at you, right? And they'll be going, what the heck? You guys, what were those computer things? What were cell phones that you messed with, you know, back in the day? Right, Annika? So, whatever comes next. Relationships with machines and eventually robots. And I hope that I've made a decent case for you when we look at the work like Alex Martinez is conducting, facial recognition in software, artificial intelligence, and to the extent that that will be melded with robotics, right? To what extent will our computers, smart TVs, cell phones, and whatever comes next interacting with us on that level, right? To what extent might they attempt to replace interaction with conspecifics? So, will the emotion within relationships differ? And this is a big question because as we change our communication, as we change our contact, our physical contact, will this in fact open the door for a new list of emotions? And remember the assignment we did, if you can name it, you can feel it. Is that true, and where will that take us? But let's maintain a focus on the body for a bit, although we're getting dangerously close to shedding the body. Consider, for example, our relationship with our health. When I first moved out of the house, and this is an interesting marker of young adulthood. You know, my mom asked me to leave the house when I was 17, and she said she'd pay my first and last month's rent if I found an apartment. She just didn't. I dropped out of college, so she was like, you know, if you're not going to go to college, then you know, there's no living at home here. So I did. I found an apartment, and it was a tiny little, you know, not even a one-bedroom. It had a living room with an L-shaped bed set in it, and that was it. And then a kitchen and a bathroom. That was all it was. And it was really almost more than I could afford. I could barely afford it. It took me almost 3 weeks' pay to pay my rent. At least it was utilities paid with that, right? But I remember one of the first things I had to do then is I had to go find a doctor. And at this point in time, I had Medicaid because I made no money, so California was going to pay my medical expenses. I got bronchitis. I found a doctor, and I went out and found a doctor and started building a relationship, a rapport with this doctor. And the doctor was of my choice, and I loved the doctor. He was a good doctor, and I would visit him, right? But it was all in person, it was face-to-face, and now increasingly what we see with technology is this kind of different relationship that we have with doctors. So increasingly from physician to technology. I don't get as much advice from my doctor as I do my healthcare provider's website via my personal health assessment, my PHA that I have to take to reduce the cost of my contribution to health insurance. During the COVID epidemic, a lot of doctors are talking about now virtual checkups, etc. So you're logging on with doctors. And I think what was kind of concerning too is my doctor, when I was going to my doctor at age 17 through my early 20s, I mean, he's basically the only person I saw. Now, you know, fast forward 40 years, and what do? You go to your general practitioner, but they do almost nothing for you but send you to a specialist. So you're constantly being exposed in a healthcare paradigm to people you don't know, right? And people who don't know you. So there's that portion that's lost. That's different. And at present, it's not been recreated. I'm not saying it's not possible to recreate it in the future, but at this point in time, every time I go to the doctor, you know, it's like, okay, well, I got to send you here, or I got to send you here, you got to go do this. So the relationship with the doctors is changing fundamentally. And in some cases, you have no specific doctor, you have a healthcare plan, and you might see an array or a team of doctors, just depending on what day you show up. Right? Pharmaceutical drugs, let's take another big aspect of it. At some point in time, the decision was made that drug manufacturers could advertise in magazines and on television. And notice how this really changes the relationship of people to doctors to drugs, kind of the whole shebang. And they say, ask your doctor. And it's like, well, back in the day, I didn't ask my doctor about the specific drug. You know, the doctor told me. He said, look, this is what's going on, and this is the drug I would like to prescribe you, and here's what I hope it'll do, and here's the side effects that are possible. But now drugs are marketed in such a way that really on the basis of emotional appeals. And one of my favorite drug advertisements, it was a launch of a new drug, and I guess it was going to be for bipolar disorder or some such, but all it was, or clinical depression, there's this beautiful music with a woman running through fields of flowers, right? And then the drug name was listed at the end of the ad, but never a word in the initial launch of this product were we told what the drug was for, right? So it was a heavy-duty emotional appeal, as they continue to be. Is this something that should have even happened at all? Well, that's a stupid question because it has happened. What is the ramifications of this happening, and how has it changed our life? But we're being increasingly digitized, so to speak. Consider as well our relationship with the generation and satisfaction of need states. Where do our needs come from? And often they're socialized, right? And those are called quasi-needs. If you take psychomotivation, we use that term. Quasi-needs are needs that are developed through our interaction with society. They're not needs to which we're born. They're not drives like a hunger drive or being driven to drink, you know, via thirst. These are quasi-needs. And so we might need this handbag because it's a certain status symbol, or a watch, or a certain phone, or this, that, or the other thing. And so our needs are being generated more and more digitally, and our satisfaction then is probably going to be digital as well. Our internet use is constantly monitored. We live in a surveillance society. You have no privacy. Just give that idea up right now. And how many of you read the EULAs, right? The End User License Agreement. We don't read those, we check it, and what it means is we're going to take your data and as much as we can learn about you, and we're going to sell it to as many people who will pay for it, who are interested in using that data. Against, no, not against you, for you? Is it against you, for you? No, it's used for them to manipulate you to develop needs to which they can hopefully satisfy. Right, sweetie? All right, so we're presented with individualized content via algorithms. So the advertisements that we're, given are based on our search histories, where we've been, what we've looked at before. And notice that this becomes a strange world because our world is being narrowed on the basis of algorithms that are generated to offer us things that we're more likely to, let's say, purchase or be interested in. So our area of choice is becoming somewhat diminished, somewhat constrained. Now, Simondon talked is Technics. Technological agency is growing. Algorithms analyze our behavior, right? Rely increasingly on artificial intelligence, which very few people, in fact, understand. The people who build the AI models understand it. The people who buy the AI models understand its potential or what it might do for them. But there's a lot of blank spots in our understanding about how this is going to shape us and how it's going to shape society. It's the interaction of humans and technology that represent a potential struggle for dominance in individuation. That is, I might not be calling my shots so much as I'd like to think anymore. That is, who I am and who I have the potential to become might be chosen for me in an increasing amount. But then, anytime someone says like that, well, he says, is it much different than it was in the past, or is it just different modalities are causing this to happen? And that's a viable argument, right? So, but it is, I think, a struggle of dominance in the process of individuation. Algorithms select content based on our past viewing behavior, and individual content is created for domains of cognition and emotion. So based on your feelings, and notice as the technology increases that your webcam, right, on your computer can then detect the facial expressions. It might also, what's presented to you on the fly, right, based on your current emotional state, which could be a good or bad thing. But I don't know that I want others manipulating my content as to shape my emotional state, which is something that's quite possible in the future. The manipulation could be extremely subtle and largely outside of our awareness, and if I wanted to push you in a direction, I could constantly present you with little features that incrementally shape you to the desired end. And notice we're losing control perhaps over our own emotional states and our own emotional regulation as a result of this. So, in case you're interested, Simondon's got a lot of works in this area. The downside is most of them are written in French, and it's pretty high-level stuff. So for most of us who study minimal French, we would have to struggle through this, although translations are available of some works, right? So this physiological data mining then. And remember when we were talking about the physiology of emotion as kind of a core component of understanding emotion, that is, and we look at Masumi, who's like placing emotion on the surface of the skin, if you will, we see smart technology that we're encouraged to wear. Like I got one right here, right? And mine's really, I don't call it a Fitbit, I call it a faux bit because it doesn't track much of anything at all, but it does give me some money off my my insurance contribution, my health insurance contribution, if I pay attention and use it and interact with my cell phone, and this reads, it's connected to my cell phone. But to what extent will these future monitoring devices supply more and more detailed information about us to the people who are purchasing that information from the people who collect that information? And this could be kind of a scary idea, because to what extent am I being monitored in ways I never really dreamt possible? So we have the Fitbit that provides physiological information to internet sources to be integrated into what? Who knows, right? And imagine as well your computer reading your facial expressions. So now you got my physiology, you got my facial expressions. What more do you need from me? What more could you possibly take at any given time? And there ain't much left when you get right down to it. Who's using it? What are they going to do with it? How is it being presented back to me, and how does that shape my thinking and my behavior? And, of course, for this course, how does it affect my emotional state and my relationship with those emotional states? If, as we discussed in the last lecture, that affect is essentially a physiological phenomenon that we respond to a label within the confines of the structures in which we're embedded, and that's the structuralist argument, right? Then what are those that monitor our affect going to do with it? And they have good access, right? They can, the sleep patterns can be monitored depending on the sophistication of your device. And I mean, really monitored. That is the amount of time spent in each of the levels of sleep, right? So we're looking at some hardcore cardiac data that's being collected as well. We're not too far away. We have the capability, if someone wanted to do it, to look at electromagnetic conductivity across the skin, via perspiration, and using that as a measure of arousal along with heart rate, pulse rate, blood pressure. All of these things combined with facial expression could provide a tremendous window into who we are that we don't necessarily want to share, but it's going to happen over such a long period of time that we're not even going to notice that information is being taken from us and then somehow being used, right? So what are they going to do with it? And how is it going to shape our future emotional experience? Because maybe they, have a reason that they want to keep me kind of on an even keel and calm. So things that might necessarily piss me off, I might read something on the computer, right, that begins to piss me off. These devices monitor it, say, we don't want him pissed off, we want him chilled out, right, because it's better for buying behavior. And then we might see manipulation of content to change my mood at that point in time. That is, the world that I'm presented might be entirely unreal and useful simply in manipulating me to somebody else's ends, primarily through cognition and emotion. So, the reciprocity of interaction, then through the reciprocity of interaction we learn who we are, how we became that person, and who we might become. And this goes back to our sociological understanding of emotion, and kind of these reflective processes. So when we talk about Goffman and we talk about interaction rituals that teach us so much about ourselves and teach us about the people with whom we interact, to what extent will that be diminished, right? Or to what extent will that just change in format to being online, but of the same nature? Who knows? And how are we going to determine how it's the same and how is it different? Because it's probably going to be a component of each, right? So technology, right, increased interaction with technology has a potential to play a profound role in the reciprocity of becoming ourselves, which I think is a reciprocal process that we did through social interaction. And now increasingly there's the potential not through social interaction, but through man-machine interaction, if you will. So technology and body might merge, according to Simon Dunn. And for those of you, the handful of you that are Star Trek Next Generation fans, here is the captain of the Enterprise during that era, Jean-Luc Picard, and he's been captured by the Borg. And the Borg is a society that travels across the galaxies, and it overtakes races, and it technologicalizes them. You become part of the collective, right? And this is, if you've heard the term, resistance is futile. Right? Resistance is futile. You will be assimilated. That is, you will be like Captain Picard. You will become part person, part machine. And they did this with species all over the galaxy. And they're all hooked into, this collective consciousness and perhaps collective unconscious. Was Jung right when he said the collective unconscious? Was he presaging the Borg of the year 24 or 2500? These are fascinating thoughts to think about, right? So, technology and body merge, according to Simon Dunn, as we see it with the Borg. As a result, anxiety will be experienced as a product of negotiating this union. Part of our new anxiety, as if we don't have enough to be anxious about, will be how we interface with this technology. And emotion then as an explanation of an affective state, if you like that definition, right, has the potential to become increasingly shaped by technology and the role of the body perhaps ever diminishing. And we may then at some time become bodiless brains, right? Our brain is put into some kind of machine, a robotic device, which gives us the promise, hey, your body won't wear out, right? It won't break down like, you know, our poor puny physical bodies would at this, our bio bodies. But if a certain amount of emotion is in the body or on the surface of the skin, what will happen to that? Will that make the transition, or will that be lost to us? And then what happens in that regard? Right? So the creator, the manager of the technology ascends in its role to shape us. Culture, business, etc. gain its potential dominance in this process. Right? We become both a product and a prisoner of our technologies. And content is fed to us in an ever defined, more precisely defined stream or structure. So what implications does that have? Well, let's come back real quick here for part 2 and talk some about that.